Welcome to the first video on using Fusion 360. So once you open the program, this is basically what it looks like. So you should end up with just a blank screen and you've got all of your settings and things across the top. Generally, the very first thing that's worth checking is if you click up in the top right corner where your login is and you go into preferences, there will be a section here called units, default units. So if you tab through these, it is worth double checking that they are in millimeters. And millimeters is generally the standard convention for when we're drawing things. Some of them will default depending on the settings in things like inches or feet, which we definitely don't want. We want the metric unit of millimeters. You could use centimeters, but again, like I said, it gets a bit confusing if you're measuring something really small. Millimeters is far more precise. So just click through these. Make sure everything that we want, length, etc. is all in millimeters. Then we just go, if anything's changed, you click apply, and we go OK. Now we're going to look at navigating Fusion 360. So there's a few little tools that you can use. The first one is, and let me just open something real quick. So using your mouse, and for Fusion 360 it is much easier if you have an actual plug-in mouse rather than trying to use a touchscreen or a keypad. So using a mouse, if you use the mouse wheel and I scroll up, it zooms out. If I scroll down, it zooms in. So I can use my mouse wheel to zoom in and out. The other one is if I click the mouse wheel, so I push it in, which is often mouse button 3, that's my move button. So I'm not actually moving the object, I'm moving my view. So it's important to know that I'm not shifting the object, I'm just shifting my view. So that's middle mouse click. If I use shift and then mouse click, so I hold shift and I press the mouse click, you'll see it's come up with like a little three-dimensional circular arrow there. That is now my rotate feature. So if I move the mouse, I can spin, I can change my pitch front to left, front to back, and I can rotate in any view I want to see. You may also notice at the very top right corner over here, my box is also moving as I pan. So you can also snap to a view using this. So if you have sort of lost track of where the front of the image is, I can click front and it'll auto rotate to that. And if I angle it back and click top, it gives me a perfectly vertical view. So this is really handy. Sometimes if you're on a slight angle like this, it looks flat and I'm drawing, but when I actually snap it, it wasn't quite flat. So it's really good to use. You can also use that to snap to things like a vertice. So if I angle it a bit more, I can snap to a corner and be on a perfectly 45. I can do another corner. I can do a top corner. So I'm looking down at a 45 in that and things like that. If you don't have the mouse feature, like if you don't have a plug-in mouse to use, you can also just click and drag this view cube. So if I just click on it and move the cube around, it basically acts in exactly the same way. So I can click and drag, and then as long as I'm sort of holding the left mouse button down while I'm over that cube, I can rotate my view. You can see here as well, it tells me which is my X, Y, and Z axis, and they're color coded. So when I try and draw something, it'll tell me which axis I'm about to draw on. On the left column, the main things you want to consider are sketches and bodies. So if I open these, a body is basically an object. So if I click on this, it'll highlight whatever that body is, which in this case is the entire image. And I can actually use the icon, and if I click that, it turns it off. So this hides the image. So it doesn't delete it, it's just saying I don't want to see it right now because often it's in the way of something else. So I can hide it for now, and then I can unhide when I'm ready to see it. If I click twice, it'll let me change the name of it. So I might call this disk, and I just press enter, and it saves the name there. So I can hide it, reload it. So that is the bodies. If you wanted to, you could hide everything in one hit if you had lots of things you wanted to hide, but otherwise you would just go through and say, I'm going to hide this body as I need to. Sketches I'm about to talk about, but a sketch is a drawing that you've done, and if a sketch is visible, it shows you what you've drawn. By default, once you edit or extrude, which I'll also talk about, a sketch, it then automatically closes that sketch. But if you're having issues where you're trying to draw on a body and the sketch keeps getting in the way, you may want to just open that and turn off a sketch, and now I can actually highlight the body itself, not the picture that I had before. But generally that shouldn't be an issue. It generally works quite well. It turns itself off. So that's general navigation. These settings across the top are a little bit more complex. Generally what we will work with is in the solid section. That's sort of just creating models and things like that. There are tools to view it in a 3D mode with different lighting. Meshes is more about if you import an image, often it'll import it as a mesh, and we can look at how we convert it back into the solid thing, which sometimes they call a B-rep, but we'll deal with that later. So in general, you've got your create, which is building things from scratch, and you've got all of your options here. So the most common are boxes, cylinders, spheres, a torus, coils, pipes, things like that. We can also create sketches, which is basically drawing a two-dimensional image, and then we can make it three-dimensional later. Your modify is more like adjusting an existing object. So we can create fillets and chamfers, which is really just smoothing off corners, whether you want to do a fillet, which is a curved corner, or a chamfer, which is a flat corner. You can create a shell, so you can basically hollow out an object. Draft don't use a great deal. Scale is just making something bigger or smaller. Combining is quite a useful tool, and that is where you basically take two objects that are touching and you make them one object, so that when you save or go to print them, it'll print as one object, not two separate files. A lot of these we don't use particularly often. Move and copy as well is quite useful. So some quick shortcuts. If I wanted to move an object, and let me just load something with more bodies to make this easier. Here I've got my Geiger counter box. So remember, if I use shift and middle mouse button, I can pan around and I can look at it from all sorts of different angles. I can use the wheel to zoom in and out, things like that. If I go to bodies, I can now see here I've labeled. So anything with an eye I can see. Anything with the sort of faded eye with a line through it, I've hidden from view so we can't see. So I want to look at moving something. Let's say the lid is not quite aligned with where I want it to be. I'll click on my left so I get a nice side-on view. If I hover over the thing, on the left side where all my bodies are, you can see that it's highlighted the lid. So in case you're like, I can't remember which part that is, I can hover over it, it'll tell me it's the lid. So if I click lid, it highlights both the body and the actual object itself. And the shortcut to move something around is just M. So M for move. If I press M, you'll see it comes up with this little thing here. And these are my options. I can either click this and rotate, and this changes the angle of the object, and it gives me angles there. And I can, of course, just type in here. If I wanted 30 degrees, I can type that in. If I want to move it in a certain axis, I can just click that arrow and I can either enter a specific value if I know what it is, or if I'm doing it visually, so if I zoom in right here, let's say it was over here and I wanted it to be here, I can just click on that arrow, I hold down, and I just slowly slide across until it lines up. And then once I'm happy with that, I can just hit enter or click OK. In this case, it won't let me because I haven't actually changed anything yet. But if I moved it all the way up here, for example, I click OK, it's now actually moved the object. So that is my move feature. So remember, you can either click the body or click it over here. M is the shortcut. And from there, I'm free to move it in any axis. So I can move up and down, I can move left to right, or I can move back and forth along the y-axis there. So I would recommend, if you're trying to align something, start in one axis. So go at the top, I'd shift it up so it's visually over the top, move it across, then I use my view option again, look side on, and now I can pull it back down to where it needs to be. And now you can see it's perfectly aligned again. So that is the move feature.